Hey friends, Rob Smith with Context. Okay, this walkthrough is going to be a little bit longer than the prior ones because we're going to jump into projects. And I think you're going to like this feature. It's pretty powerful. As you may know from using Context, you can build frameworks, as many frameworks as you want, using scores of mental models that we have built into the platform, all backed by AI. What projects allows you to do is take one step above that and really build any project, any idea, any goal. Like you can organize anything as a project. It becomes a folder for approaching a context in a more methodical way where you're going to pack a lot of frameworks into it and you want to organize those frameworks. So let me give you an overview of the feature. Here I am on the application main screen. I will go to projects and I will create a new project. Now for this one, I'm actually going to demonstrate a couple of different features that I think are pretty cool. So I'm going to create a project and I'm going to call this one political philosophy. Seems like it's a useful thing, kind of timely for the season. Now, I put political philosophy in, and you can see that right away it says, Welcome to the Political Philosophy Project, what I just named it. Now, there's several things I could do from here. Um, I can start with a blank section. This is where I'd start to outline my project, almost like a table of contents. If I want to say section one, section two, section three, and I could start building out frameworks within that. I could do it manually, or I can give the project an overall context. And then I could hit get section recommendations, and the AI would actually analyze my project. It would analyze what my context was, my project context, and it's going to recommend not only the sections, but it's going to recommend the frameworks within each section. It's a very powerful feature, and it really depends on how you want to use it or how you want to get started. Even if you have it recommend the sections, and you go that way, you can still do all of the manual editing that you want of sections. You can delete them, you can add new sections, you can still move them around and rename them and all of that. But the AI can get kind of bootstrap you into it very quickly. All right, so either way you want to go is fine. Um, I will, because it does not yet have any context on this, I'm going to go to here, which is our context for the whole project. And you can see when you say, well, what kind of context do you give it? The answer is, well, it could be very short or it could be very long, as always. Sometimes I'll put in, like I've said before, a couple of pages of context into a project. So it really has a lot of information to work from. Other times I may say, yeah, I'm not ready to give it all of that context. I want to just kind of get started. So I might only do a sentence or two, which is what I'll do tonight. But these are some of the questions you might answer as you're giving it context. Like, what are you aiming to achieve with the project? Are there any significant obstacles? Are there any team dynamics or people dynamics? Who's involved in it? Is there any leadership issues or resource constraints? And then, is there a broader impact you're looking at? And obviously, you could change those questions and answer other questions if it was specific to your context. So we're doing a political philosophy project. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to say something simple like, help me understand political philosophy. Maybe I'll add a few more things. Yeah, its main theorists and its history. All right. So again, I could have made that much more complex, but I think that's good enough for our particular use. So now I'll go back to the project. I've added the context. And you know what? Let's see how it does. I will hit the AI and we'll get some section recommendations for what it's done. Okay, beautiful. So now I've come into my project. You can see on the left-hand side, it's already begun to build like the table of contents, my framework map. And that same framework map is also represented on the main screen here. Section 1, historical context. What are the key historical milestones that have shaped political philosophy? And you can see that it's making a recommendation of 3 frameworks here. It's recommending an interrelate zone analysis, a critical realism analysis, and an academic map. Okay, very cool. It's got a second section, major theorists. Who are the influential theorists in political philosophy and what are their contributions? The recommendations are a cultural survey, perspective taking, and a schools of philosophy lens. That's great. So I actually wanted to use that and show that to you. Key concepts. What are the foundational concepts of political philosophy? First principles thinking, summarize and pros and cons. And then finally, contemporary relevance. How does political philosophy apply to current political issues? Scenario planning, decision scan, key questions to ask. Now, again, I could ignore all of his recommendations and do my own, or I could use them. So I will start with the historical context and the academic map. You'll notice here that in the project, you get a button that you don't get in the normal framework piece. And the reason for that, this show full context, is that context is cascading. You might think of context as hierarchical because the overall project context matters, right? Whatever the project context is a kind of our overall and closing context for everything we do inside the project. And so you can see that it says project context, the project name, and I have what I had written in there. Help me understand political philosophy, its main theorists, and its history. Now, the next level down is the section context. What are the key historical milestones that have helped shape political philosophy? And then finally, the topic, which is by summarizing key points from different academic disciplines, this lens provides insights into the evolution of political thought over time. Now, you'll notice that I actually haven't typed anything since the initial context that I put very up at the project level. It is developing my context for me as I go. Now, I could edit any of this. I could hit the edit button. I could change this. I could hit the edit button and change this if I want to narrow it in a different way. But if I really want to get quickly into the topic and I want it to do more of the work, then it will do that. The reason why this is super powerful is because it's created this cascading context that's made it more and more specific so that I'm looking at academic disciplines through the lens of historical milestones in order to understand political philosophy. Okay. So, and it's going to build an academic map out of that and put it into quadrants. I will hit create. As always, remember that with the academic maps and the other things where it is pulling from the reference domain, there's a failure, so we'll run it again, see if it'll go again. If it's pulling from the domain, sometimes it hallucinates. So I always check our references if I'm doing something that's got a lot of heavy references. Yeah, so it's having trouble. I'll run this one more time, and if this doesn't work, then we'll try something else. So yeah, check the references on the academic map, check it on the some of the ones that's bringing forward papers and that kind of thing. So you can see I don't get flustered when it fails a few times. Just try it again. We have an outage. We have an outage alert anytime some of the OpenAI stuff goes down. I mean, things are not always 100% stable. So just keep trying, and usually it'll go through pretty fast. So here we go. Here's an academic map. And let's just pick one in the upper left, psychology. So it's giving me a whole topic, psychology, the evolution of political consciousness. The field of psychology examines how individuals' cognitive frameworks regarding political systems and structures have evolved. The rise of Enlightenment thinking, for instance, highlighted individual autonomy and reason as critical to political decision-making, substantially altering how people perceive their role in society. And the references, Politics and Vision, Continuity and Innovation in Western Political Thought by Sheldon Wolin, 2004. Pretty awesome, right? I mean, I would want to check that reference, make sure it's real and is accurate, but very cool because now I have, I mean, literally a map across all four quadrants: psychology, biology, empirical political science, phenomenology, anthropology, sociology, economics, and cultural studies of this one subcontext, right? Really powerful. So I will go back to the project. And now you can see that in this project, I still have my two recommendations, but I also have the academic map, which is now actually live and published. let me go to the major theorists here. Who are the influential theorists in political philosophy and what are their contributions? So I'm going to run a schools of philosophy lens. This is a fun lens if you are into philosophy, like I am, and many of us are. And again, we'll look at the context just to remind ourselves where we are. Help me understand political philosophy. Okay, that's the project. Who are the influential theorists in political philosophy? What are their contributions? Okay. And then this lens will help frame the contributions of different schools of thought within political philosophy. All right, that's great. But I'm going to pick a school of philosophy to kind of analyze it through. Now, this gets really fun if you like philosophy, because there's a lot of them in here, right? Everything realism, existentialism, Marxism, phenomenology, both analytic and continental, um, deontology, Kantian stuff, Whiteheadian process philosophy, etc. So let's pick Stoicism and see what it does. Sometimes with some of these combinations, being as, having designed the platform, I still don't know exactly what it will come up with. And I always find it surprising and educational when I see what it does. So what it is doing is giving me the Stoics' view of political philosophy through four quadrants. These are the intentional commitments. Here's the methodological commitments. Here's the social commitments, and here's the values commitments of Stoicism as it relates to political philosophy. So, in the intentional commitments, we have their ontological commitments, or their commitments related to being, what then was known as metaphysics. Stoicism views political philosophy through the lens of rational nature and the natural order. It commits to the idea that human beings are part of a larger rational cosmos, and thus political structures should harmonize with this natural order. Okay, great. The upper right, methodological commitments around logic and reason, as we just saw. A temporal perspectives. It advocates for a timeless perspective on political structures, enduring principles that reflect eternal truths about human nature and the cosmos. In the lower right, it's social commitments. What's the role of philosophy? Stoic philosophy aims to guide political structures towards rationality, virtue, and alignment with the natural order. Really neat. And as always, if I wanted to expand on any of these things, I could build a whole lens nest below them. I could explain it. I could take perspectives on it. I could do first principles analysis. I could do more academic maps. Really, the sky's the limit in terms of the mental models that I might want to apply to this. So you can begin to see how I am building out my project in each of these sections, right? Now, I might say, oh, you know what? That framework, that schools of philosophy lens, it didn't really give me the major theorists, did it? Okay, no problem. Let me create a framework, and I can always go to build your own. Say, tell me who are the major theorists in political philosophy. So this is a useful demonstration that if for some reason the mental models we've put on here don't meet your needs, you can always go and do your own. You can always just go build your own prompt. And you can see I'm kind of being redundant here because this says who are the influential theorists, and then I'm coming into the prompt saying, yeah, tell me who the major theorists are. Like I don't want to have any ambiguity about that. And then again, I'll pick quadrants. I could put it in a table. I mean, there are different valid choices there. And there we are. Okay. And what's nice about what I like what it did here is just looking at it from the point of view. Interesting. I probably would have organized it a little bit differently in terms of where it put these in the quadrants. Locke definitely makes sense in the upper left or the lower left as a social contract philosopher. Karl Marx arguably could belong in the lower right with his dialectical materialism. Plato in the upper left with his more of his idealism. But in any case, it really pretty good, right? Niccolo Machiavelli is a realist. Rawls could go in the lower right, but really neat, right? It gives you a a quick overview, and you might decide, oh, I thought not quite good enough. I'm going to go refine my prompt, or I'm going to put it into a different shape. I could put it into a historical shape. I could put it into phases, like give me the phases of political philosophy, and uh, tell me what the progression of ideas is. I often do something like that with the historiography lens. This is a sort of cultural anthropology lens, and let's do an anthropological overview, and we'll put it into a table and see what it does. So you can see there's really a give and take between kind of what you're doing and what you're trying to push it to develop and what it's kind of recommending and how it's helping you think about it. And that give and take is actually really healthy and kind of fun because it might instruct you in ways you hadn't thought about. And then it gets certain things wrong or things that just aren't that useful. And you prune them like a tree and you just decide, okay, no, that's not quite right. So cultural survey anthropology framework, I'll close this to make it a little bit easier to read. You got Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, Marx, Rawls. Okay. You got the core ideas and then the anthropological context, right? This is really cool stuff. Yep. You got Locke responding to the Reformation and Counter Reformation problems. So, really, really neat. And I hope that what you're seeing is that you could really build out a project very quickly and really get a very both systematic because you can organize it, both systematic overview, but also very, very deep and detailed dive into these areas in order to decide what's most relevant to you. In key concepts, we'll do a first principles thinking framework. This is a really great framework for really breaking something down into fundamental ideas. So assumptions at the base of the pyramid, break the problem down into fundamental principles, new solutions, secondary consequences, and then synthesis. Okay, the current assumptions, right, of political philosophy. Assumption that societies inherently require governance. Assumption that power dynamics are a natural aspect of human interaction. Belief in the necessity of a social contract. That actually is an assumption that didn't come up until roughly the 16th century, 16th, 17th century. Assumption that justice is a fundamental component of political philosophy and believe that political systems need a form of legitimacy, right? And of course, the question of legitimacy has been one of the major contentions of all political philosophy for thousands of years. What does create a legitimate government? And then it goes into breaking the problem into fundamental principles, creating new solutions, exploring decentralized governance, et cetera, redefining a social contract in the digital age, secondary consequences, second order effects, and finally synthesis. So I could, if I was truly working in this, I would go back, I could refine my prompt and really get deeply into this first principles thinking in some way that met my needs. The last thing I'll show you is that if I decide that any of these frameworks belong in a different place, let's say my school is a philosophy lens. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really belong in the theorist thing. I can always drag and drop it, and now it's right there in key concepts, right? It just shifted. I can also take my sections, I can rearrange them this way. So I actually have a tremendous amount of power with how I arrange a project and how I work with it. The other thing I would point out is that you have seen that it's pulling this context into every framework that's being built below it. This is editable. I mean, I could sit here and write a full um, document or a full set of larger context that then would pull into every framework that's built underneath this section. This becomes really important if I want to generate a prompt or a kind of a subcontext for this section itself. So this is called historical context. Let me switch over to this one so it's not quite confusing. If I wanted to have a subcontext, because we already looked at the project context at the top, that's up here. This is being pulled in every time. If I wanted to have a subcontext related to major theorists so that every framework I develop in this bucket automatically pulls in this context, well, I could sit there and write, as long as I want, a paragraph or two here that would give it more context just for this section. This is a really powerful feature because it allows you, it's almost like an organization. If you were thinking about it on a company basis, you might put the company's, mission and its overall description of what it does in the world at the project level. But then you could say, okay, this is my finance team, right? So what is the context and the goal of the finance department? What is the goal and context of the sales and marketing function? What is the goal and context of the service or customer support team or what have you? And it would pull those contexts in specific to the frameworks built in just those sections. So you can see how thinking about context hierarchically and then organizing it by sections becomes a really powerful tool for rapidly getting better and better answers and better frameworks developed in each of the major sections. And you really are in the driver's seat around that. If after you've entered all your context and you say, I really don't like its recommendations that it originally gave me, you can always hit this button here and it will recommend new frameworks based on the context that's sitting in this in here. It'll reread it and say, okay, what can I do better? And it will recommend other frameworks. If I don't want these recommendations here anymore, I simply exit out. It puts it in the archive. I could take both of those, and you can now see in my historical context, I have a single framework, no recommendations. Okay. So a lot of power that you get with projects. We think it's a pretty robust set of features. We are happy to offer it to you, and hopefully you enjoy using it. And please give us all the feedback that you can, and we'll be happy to continue to evolve the platform alongside your needs. As always, thanks for being with us. Take care.